Hello, my dear friend. Welcome to another episode of the Reflective Parenting Podcast. Are any of these statements triggering to you? Why are you so upset? You're overreacting. Calm down. It's not worth getting all worked up about. Oh, you're being so dramatic. You're always so negative. Just look at the bright side. Stop worrying so much. There's nothing to be anxious about. If any of these are triggering, or you've been told this by your partner, there's a reason why it's triggering. It's because these statements are invalidating your emotional experience. And we spoke about this last week in the episode and the interview that I had with Dr. Carolyn Fleck, the author of the book called Validation. If you haven't heard that episode yet, you need to start with that one. This is sort of a part 2 because when we reflected on that episode inside the Reflective Parent Club, because what I do is I take that week's episode for the podcast and we dig deeper. We see, how does this apply to my life? What can I do differently? Or how can I notice this in my own life to build my self-awareness? When we did that last week, so many parents wanted this topic to be extended to a second week. And so many parents felt that they were struggling to see when they were doing that themselves. And so today we're going to dig a little bit deeper in invalidation and the impact it has. We spoke about the impact in invalidation on the relationship between you and your child. We're going to focus a little bit more on what dismissing or invalidating looks like in a relationship. And I'm going to highlight a study with you today that talks about how it leads, not just invalidation, but other parts or your conflict style and how that can lead to higher rates of divorce. And so we're going to cover all of that in a short episode today. It's a solo episode. And so I want to make sure that it's short enough for you to listen to on the car ride to work or back, and that it helps you continue your understanding on invalidation and the importance of it. Before we begin, if you are somebody who's new here, welcome. Curious Neuron is the company that I founded many years ago now with the hopes to support parents. I just felt that there was a lot out there about parenting that was telling us parents what to do, and that's great. We need that. However, we needed something that was supporting us a little bit more, teaching us about ourselves, helping us develop our self-awareness. And more importantly, my PhD focused on emotions and mental health. And so I share emotional intelligence. And by the way, that covers so many aspects of what we do. It's self-awareness, emotion regulation skills, but also conflict resolution and relationships. And so I cover all of this inside Curious Neuron, as well as our club called the Reflective Parenting Club, or the Reflective Parent Club. And so if you'd like to learn more about that, we're going to talk about it throughout the episode, but you click the link in the show notes. You get 7 days for free to try it out, and you get to meet with me every single week and build your self-awareness. If it's something like this, like today, the topic we're discussing, if you're not even sure if you're invalidating your partner or your partner is invalidating you, and you'd like to start setting boundaries or start speaking up, then join us for the weekly call. We'll be talking about that this week and reflecting on that. I'd like to thank the Tannenbaum Open Science Institute as well as the McConnell Foundation. These are the two organizations that are supporting the Reflective Parenting Podcast. And I'm very grateful for them because they believe in the importance of science, just like I do. I also want to thank you, the listener, for listening to the podcast. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure that you have clicked on that subscribe button. And if you can, so that's the most important part, make sure you're subscribed so that every Monday you receive the episode, you see the update. But in addition to that, please take a moment to rate the podcast on 5 stars if you can, whether you're listening to it on Spotify or Apple Music. Some of these episodes are also available on YouTube. This one will also be available on YouTube. And you can listen to it there if you want. So you can listen to it in the background while you're doing something. But just take a moment to rate the podcast if you can and leave a review. Send me an email at info@curiousneuron.com if you do leave a review, because that is really important to me. And I will send you a little something to thank you. All right, so let's go back to those 5 invalidating statements that I shared at the beginning of the episode. Why are you so upset? You're overreacting. And I know that sometimes it comes out. And as we learned in the last episode of this podcast, generational cycles of invalidation are extremely hard to break. And so the first piece of today's episode is really for you to notice, am I invalidating my partner's emotional experience? Or is my partner invalidating my emotional experience? Or maybe in some cases, we're both invalidating each other. So saying something like, why are you so upset? You're overreacting. It's telling your partner that their feelings are excessive or unjustified, making them feel like their emotions are wrong. They are reacting this way. And so to them, it is valid. If you know that they overreact and that leads to them feeling very anxious, it could be said differently than invalidating their emotions, because we know now the impact or the negative impact that invalidating has on a relationship. If you think about how you felt growing up, if you were invalidated, we have a parent inside the Reflected Parent Club that shared how they were able to still feel the intensity and the sadness and hurt that came from being invalidated from their own parents. Something as simple as the dark, uh, telling your parents that you were afraid of the dark and then being told, oh, relax, there's nothing to be afraid of. And then your parents walking away. That invalidating statement is hurtful to the point that some adults still feel that and still remember it. And so the same hurt happens within a relationship. These are micro, I don't know what you could call them, but obviously they're not big moments when you're being rude or shaming or belittling your partner, but invalidation are tiny tears in the relationship. And so how can you change this invalidating statement of, why are you so upset? You're overreacting. You could say something like, I see that you're feeling upset, right? The I see is that part that Carolyn Fleck spoke about in the last podcast episode. So you could say, I see that you're feeling upset. Can you tell me what's making you feel this way? Or help me understand what's going on. All of a sudden, you're validating that without accepting or understanding what they're going through, but at least that person feels seen and they feel heard. Saying something like, calm down, it's not worth getting worked up about. It's invalidating because it's dismissing your partner's current emotional state again. And also it's implying that they should switch it off, which is not possible. It often increases that person's frustration, especially that word calm down. Not only is it invalidating, but it just feels like you're not being supported by your partner. And so what you can change that to is, I can tell this is really bothering you. I'd like to understand why. And remember, Carolyn Fleck taught us in the last episode that you are not agreeing with what is going on. You are not saying that I agree that you should be acting this way, but at least you're saying, I see that this situation is leading you to feel this way. I see you. And there's a huge impact on your connection with that person when you feel seen. Another statement is, you're being so dramatic. It's invalidating because now you're being dramatic. You have labeled your partner. This is a label that we place. And if you remember inside the Reflective Parent Club, you know that we talk about these thoughts that we have where we label ourselves. And if we label ourselves such as, I'm a bad parent, I'm a bad partner, I'm dumb, I'm an idiot. When we say these things internally, we are increasing the anxiety. We are changing physiologically what is happening in our body. It becomes your partner describing a character flaw. And now that is a whole different thing. That is having a negative impact on your relationship. What you can do is acknowledge that person's perspective and say something like, it sounds like this situation feels overwhelming right now. Now you haven't labeled the person. You're saying that from what they're saying, it sounds like they're feeling overwhelmed. And this can lead to them saying, I am. I want to take a moment to share something that a parent messaged me on Instagram, because feeling overwhelmed is something that many of us are feeling right now as parents. And I had posted about a post about invalidating our partner, and somebody said, I find this really interesting. I tend to invalidate my partner's overwhelm because I am overwhelmed as well, but I'm not seeking to talk about it or seeking support. My partner does. I think that it's because saying something like, and this is to her partner, I think that if I say something to my partner like, how can I support you? It opens me up to a request that I can't help with and that I probably have to say no to, which I don't like to do. but I'm sure there's something I can help with. So the post led to this mom reflecting on other ways that she can support her partner. Instead, so she said, she continues, for example, instead of taking on one of his tasks, I could simply listen to his struggle or even help him talk through ideas for areas he can cut back on. I'm now thinking that it's an issue I have with setting my own boundaries or being uncomfortable saying no to him. And then this last statement is what is really impactful to me. She says, which would help me show up better for my partner. This is why we are extending last week's episode into this podcast episode. This is why we need to talk about it, because it truly is impactful on a relationship. And we're going to hear the study very soon, and you're going to see why it's impactful. All right. These two last statements. So you're always so negative. Just look at the bright side. It's invalidating because now you are criticizing their emotional pattern instead of recognizing the valid stress or hardship behind their feelings. And so one of these statements you can change into, it makes sense that you feel discouraged, giving everything that you're dealing with. Now you validated everything that they're going through. If you are a partner listening to this saying, yeah, but if I were to say this every single day, nothing changes with my partner. They remain negative all the time. I just want you to test this for 2 weeks. Just test it. Try validating your partner in their situation and just see if anything changes. Do they start talking? Do they decrease the intensity of the feeling that they're experiencing? Take a moment to test it, because it's easy to say this won't work or I can't do it. But if validating your partner is going to lead to the intensity coming down of the emotion or them feeling a little bit more connected to you, then maybe within 2 weeks, you will notice a difference. That will be enough evidence for you to see how important validating is. And then maybe that'll change part of your relationship. Maybe you can tell your partner after 2 weeks that you've noticed a big difference and that you've been working on noticing and being mindful of validating their emotions, and that now you've seen the impact of it and that you would like them to start working on it. Maybe they can listen to this episode with you, but taking the time to test it is the first piece. All right, with the last one, it says, just stop worrying so much. There's nothing to be anxious about. I really want to take a moment to sit with this one because I have heard many people, mostly dads, but dads saying this to moms in their postpartum phase, right? So you've just had a baby or even up to a year ago, and you might have more anxiety than you did before having a baby. And so you worry about everything, the time your child goes to bed at, when did they take their nap? What are they eating? How big is the piece? Where are they playing? Are they in the sand? What did they put in their mouth? Are they putting anything in their mouth? Who's with them? Everything, every single thing worries you. And I don't want that to be invalidated, because when it's invalidated, it doesn't help any part of what we feel. I was very anxious when I had my first child, and being invalidated, being told there was nothing to worry about, it's not going to make my own anxiety go away. It's not going to make your partner's anxiety go away. In fact, it's going to make your partner angry because not only are you not helping me, who's feeling very anxious in this moment, but now I'm angry towards you because of your invalidation. And this kind of sentence minimizes and denies your partner's anxiety. It's there. You saying that there's nothing to be anxious about will not make it go away. It is there. You have denied it, which can make the person feel ashamed and, more importantly, so alone in their struggle. Let me say that one more time. Invalidating our partner's anxiety, especially in the postpartum period, will make them feel ashamed for feeling this way, so they might not speak to you about it anymore. But more importantly, it will make them feel so alone in the struggle that they are experiencing. What you can do in order to validate this feeling and this emotional experience that they're having is you could say, it sounds like you're feeling anxious right now. That must be really uncomfortable. How can I support you? Please partners that have an anxious partner, please listen to this one more time. It sounds like you're feeling anxious right now. That must be really uncomfortable. How can I support you? Notice your partner's body change, their body language, their shoulders relax, their face, their muscles in their face calm down and relax. Your muscles can't calm down, but they can relax. But notice everything change when you're being told this. And you can now have a space to share how you feel. That is the kind of support from a partner that will lead to more connection and less conflict and better relationships. And if you can work on these 5 statements, noticing when you say them or when they're being told to you, highlighting them and working on this together as a couple, it will make a difference on the impact of your relationship. This got me thinking a little bit more about conflict, right? Because in the end, this is why inside the Reflective Parent Club, we have 4 pillars. So there's a course, a program that I've created that has these 4 pillars. The first one is self-awareness, because you can't work on yourself and learning how to regulate your emotions if you don't know what regulates you. So many parents that come into the club because there are 3 or 4 scales I think you take. Yeah, 3 or 4. I think 4. There are 4 scales that you take that when you join. So let's say you join for your free week, you get an email that has these 4 scales that give you information about how you perceive stress, how you how competent you feel as a parent, your well-being, your overall well-being, and how your dysregulation shows up in various aspects of your life. And so many parents say, I had no idea I was being triggered, or I felt triggered by sound or by light this much, to the point that it was triggering me. And so this is why self-awareness is so important. And the first part of all this, you first have to understand what dysregulates you and what triggers you. Then once you start understanding this, you start applying emotion regulation skills, which is greatly, or a big part of this is in your thoughts. I can be in the same situation as you. Somebody says something to me and says something to you, and the way you perceive it, or the lens that you have for this situation, can be different than the way I perceive it and the lens I have. And when we shift that, or we shift the inner dialogue that we have in this situation, we can shift our emotional response to it. We don't react as much. That's the second part. Then the third and fourth piece has to do with you and someone else. And this is what I'm going to focus on right now, because you can learn how to regulate your emotions by yourself, and you're going to master it by yourself. In your home, in your room, never leaving your house, never seeing your kids, never seeing your partner. Hey, you've mastered emotion regulation skills. But then you place yourself in a social situation with your partner, with your parent, with your in-law, with your child. And now these emotion regulation skills that you've learned and you've repeated to yourself, you've journaled for 3 months straight by yourself, and nobody has seen you. You haven't come out of your house, and now you're like, I am the emotion regulation guru. And you come out of your house and your in-laws are there and they say something about how you parent your child, and you're like, what? And you react to them and you feel yourself bubbling inside. That's because you have to practice emotion regulation skills in social situations. So all of this is part of the Reflective Parent Club. There is nothing out there like this. This is why we've now partnered with clinics. There are 5 clinics, 3 in the US, 1 in Canada, and 1 in Kenya, that are now partners of Curious Neuron, that are sharing the Reflective Parent Club in these pediatric clinics because of how important the work is that we're doing. And so if you want this to be inside your child's clinic and get discounts and get special, there's going to be a free webinar series that are going to be advertised in these clinics. If you want all of this at your child's clinic, or yours if you're listening to this, send me an email at info@curiousneuron.com. As soon as we are done this pilot project over the summer, it's September, we are going to launch in many more clinics. This is not parenting advice. Remember, this is helping you learn how to regulate your emotions, not only with your child, but in all situations. And so let's dig into this one study that talked about the importance of conflict and your behaviors in a conflict and how it can impact the rate of divorce. So the study says that researchers often categorize conflict behaviors such as being destructive, constructive, or withdrawal. Destructive behaviors include overtly negative reactions to marital problems such as yelling, insults, criticism, belligerence, and contempt. Constructive behaviors involve overtly positive reactions, such as saying nice things, calmly discussing the problem, and active listening. Withdrawal behaviors entail disengaging from the conflict, or a person may leave the situation or keep quiet. So there's destructive behaviors in conflict, constructive behaviors, or withdrawal. These are important, and this study, the link is in the show notes, by the way. This study was called Marital Conflict Behaviors and Implications for Divorce Over 16 Years. And it's an older one, so it's 2010 in the Journal of Marriage and Family. And I just thought it was important because sometimes there's a little bit of criticism around Gottman and their research because of the procedures, not just the procedures, but I think like they don't have control groups and so on. And so the study really wanted to look at these behaviors and see if any of these behaviors led to an increased chance of divorce or rate of divorce. And they also wanted to see if when you come into a marriage, if you are, for example, if you withdraw and you start your relationship this way, will you continue this kind of behavior and conflict throughout your entire marriage? So that's pretty fascinating, I find, as a study. So here's what they found. Actually, before I dive into what they found, I wanted to share the way that they defined even more in detail destructive, constructive, and withdrawal. So these were some of the questions from their questionnaire. So destructive behaviors included items like I yelled and shouted at my spouse. I insulted my spouse or called them a name. I brought up things that happened long ago. I had to have the last word. So these were the 4 statements that defined if that person had destructive behaviors in conflict. For constructive behaviors in conflict, there were 5 items. I calmly discussed the situation. I listened to my spouse's point of view. I tried hard to find out what my spouse was feeling. I tried to say nice things. And I tried to make my spouse laugh. These are considered constructive behaviors. And their finding around this was really interesting. I'll get to that in a second. The third one was withdrawal behaviors that included 2 items. I went away for a while to cool down before we talked it out. And 2, I suddenly became very quiet and pulled away. Now, knowing all of this, here is what they found. So as expected, husbands and wives who reported using more destructive behaviors had a higher rate of divorce. Constructive behaviors were associated with divorce as well, but not in the expected direction. Greater constructive behaviors among wives predicted greater divorce rates. Here's what they found. When you have 2 partners and they have different conflict styles, and you have, on average, they noticed that the wives over time would work on their conflict styles. However, if a wife worked on her conflict style and went from destructive or withdrawal towards constructive, and the partner didn't change their conflict behaviors and remained destructive or withdrawal, then this still led to divorce because of how constructive behaviors are perceived by the other partner that is still using destructive or withdrawal. It's almost like an annoyance. So while I'm trying to shut you down or belittle you or shame you to stop this conflict, you are trying to make me laugh or problem solve, or you're active listening. And that seems to be, this is not the word that they used, but annoying and frustrating to the person who wants to shut it down, who wants to stop it. And so this pattern of the wife in particular changing over time from destructive or withdrawal to constructive still led to divorce. I think this finding is fascinating. And I feel like I need to shout it out to everybody, because the reason why I'm saying this is because we have moms and dads inside the Reflective Parent Club, but mostly moms. And when I meet with you, so you take the scales and then I meet with you for half an hour to discuss what the outcome of, or what these scales mean and what you can start to work on first inside the program. And very often I have moms who want to work on their conflict style with their partners so that they can have better conflict. But now the study that I read this weekend reminded me that it has to be both of you. Both of you have to work on it, because if it's just you, it's not going to, it might not fix everything. And so both partners have to say, hey, this conflict is not working. But unfortunately, the study showed that women are more likely to have a change over time versus men. Their conflict style, when they looked at them, because they followed the couples for 16 years, if a partner begins a marriage with withdrawal or destructive behaviors and conflict, the men are unlikely to change their patterns versus the women are more likely to start working at some point on their patterns. This is hard to hear. I read this and I'm thinking about everybody who's going to hear this. You might realize that change needs to happen in your marriage. And so let this sit for a little bit. What does this mean? What do you need from your partner? What conversation do you need? Or maybe you need to hear this episode together or read the study. I have it in the show notes. I know that it isn't easy, but it's an important study for everyone to kind of hear and listen to. And so it's not just invalidation. Invalidation is part of your conflict style. If you just keep invalidating your partner or being invalidated, it is destructive towards that relationship. Similarly to the relationship with your child, as we spoke about last week. And so one thing that you can take away from this is, what is the conflict style between my partner and I? Take a moment to think about what they are more toward, like what they gravitate towards, destructive, constructive, or withdrawal, and what you gravitate towards. What's that mix when you guys are having conflict? How can you surface this, right? If we just ignore it and we know what our conflict styles are, but we're never talking about it, how can we make a change? And so if you need some support, come join the Reflective Parent Club. Try it free for 7 days. Come join a weekly call alone or maybe with your partner, and then see how it sheds light on building awareness on so many parts of your life that I hope will lead to more regulated, feeling more calm, feeling more connected to the people around you. That is the goal of the Reflective Parent Club. And I'll be talking about this tomorrow. So today's Monday. I'll be talking about this tomorrow in the Tuesday call. We meet every Tuesday at 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. By the way, if you are looking for a freebie, I have a freebie about triggers. So you could click the link in the show notes and download a free workbook that's going to help you understand why you might feel triggered. And it's going to help you understand your nervous system as well. And also, I'm going to be starting in July, on July 28th. Every month, I will be giving a free workshop online for parents, not about parenting always, but for parents, covering everything that we talk about here in the podcast. And so if you would like to join my mailing list, if you are not on the mailing list, click the link in the show notes and you will become part of the mailing list, and you will get the Zoom link to the next call or the next workshop. And the next workshop is going to help you prepare your child for kindergarten from an emotional and social perspective. And so you can click the link in the show notes for your trigger workbook, or or to join the next workshop on July 28th. I'll see you next week. Bye.